Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are about at the midway stages of this 2031 to 2032 offseason. The international amateur free agent signing period is going to beginning in just a couple of days. And want to start off the episode, first of all, by just thanking everyone who's opined over the last 24 hours on what we should do in international amateur free agency with the trade that we have been proposed to potentially move on from Humberto Duque, the top prospect in our system, and even the thoughts that were shared on other topics, such as what to do with Shohei Ohtani this upcoming season. So, thank you to Dralix, Three Quarters Badger, Jackhammer Possessor, Not My Four-Ply, Fake Name, Dino Nation Blogger, Andrew Grattan, Magic. I think that's the list of all of you who opined in very short order on the questions I asked. So really do appreciate the input. And I think it's definitely going to help us come to a good resolution of the potential Duque trade, as well as hopefully a successful international amateur free agency period coming up. But before we get into those moves that we're probably going to be spending the bulk of this episode on, just a quick summary of what we've been able to do over the first couple months of the off season, given that it was early November that the off season started in earnest. We made a big trade for Chris Sabatka, traded away a couple of decent pitching prospects, traded away our longtime first baseman Takao Ota, and a couple of other players to bring Sabatka on board, who is definitely not an ace, but we think can be a good, solid major league starter for us, even though right now he's penciled in as our ace, according to our bench coach. Clearly have a lot more to think about before that may or may not become reality. We also re-signed Hayden Yinger, guy who we had been going through this entire past year thinking he was completely done with us. But he was only looking for about $4 million a year. We ended up signing him for a little less than that. And he has been a pretty successful starting pitcher for us over the past few seasons. He's been with us 4 years total here in Buffalo. And over that time period, put up a 3.36 ERA over 111 starts. So he's pretty much only a 5-inning starter, but still has been effective for us. So glad to have him back. And then we most recently picked up Rani Henriquez in the Rule 5 draft, who is definitely in the mix to make our 26-man roster for this upcoming season as a reliever. So those are kind of the three changes, although I guess technically Mr. Yinger is not even technically a change since he's back. Taking a look at the position players, Henry Allen, 25-year-old first baseman, we brought on through the Rule 5 draft. Steve Frazier is a 22-year-old left fielder that we picked up in the Rule 5 draft. Both of those guys should be competing for a roster spot. Austin Wells, our most expensive free agent signing this offseason. That said, he's still only making $5 million this upcoming year. We've got team options for the second and third year of that contract. View him as a potential corner outfielder slash first baseman slash DH, which was the biggest hole in the lineup that we felt we needed to fill this offseason. Made a trade to bring Miguel Blaze back to the team as a right-handed hitting outfielder, likely mostly coming off the bench. And then the big move is we are moving Shohei Ohtani to become an everyday player again, rather than the pitcher he has been for us the last 5 seasons since we picked him up from the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or I guess they are technically the Anaheim Angels at this point. Or no, they are the Los Angeles Angels. They're not the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim anymore. They're just the Los Angeles Angels, and they were the California Angels when I was younger. So no insults to those of you who happen to be Angels fans, but your marketing and you're trying to find an identity is confusing to those of us who don't pay a lot of attention to your team. And with all of those potential changes or actual changes at this point that I've outlined, we still have got over $9 million to spend, and we've boosted scouting and development slightly from where they were a year ago. Certainly could look to put some more money in those, but feel like we're in a pretty good spot right now. We've addressed the major issues we wanted to this off season. We've got some extra players who are going to be in camp in case we have injuries, or in case one of those Rule 5 picks in particular is a real impressive standout. And as we get to know them better and scout them better, we see some potential there that we don't necessarily see right now. We've bought ourselves some optionality with those players too. So really looking forward to seeing what this team looks like. Definitely agree with, I think it was Magic who brought this up in the comments to our last episode, that we're taking a risk moving Ohtani out of the rotation. I feel with the 6 guys we have here listed as potential starters, they are all good, solid potential major league starters, and you can see that 5 of the 6 of them won 12 games or more last year for us, or in the case of Sabatka, other teams. And all Jorge Carrillo, the 25-year-old, has done is put up 276 and 237 ERAs in his 2 years in the majors with us, as he's been waiting for a shot in the starting rotation. So I feel like we definitely have quantity for the starting rotation. We are losing top-end quality, at least in terms of the star ratings and the stuff movement and control ratings, and most importantly, the actual performance on the field that Ohtani's given us in the rotation the last 5 years. But I didn't feel like we had a good replacement for him in right field, whereas I felt like with, at this point, 6 good, solid major league quality starters, we've got plenty of potential replacements for him in the rotation. And if things don't work out, the nice thing about OOTP compared to real-life baseball is that we could put Ohtani back in the rotation in June by snapping our fingers and clicking a couple of buttons on our mouse. And that's always an option if things don't work out and we end up having a little more offense than we had anticipated, and or we have a bigger hole in the starting rotation than we anticipated. So moving on to one of the key questions that I asked at the end of the last episode, and again, sincerely appreciate everyone who shared thoughts on what you would do with this dilemma, because it was a dilemma to me. I didn't have a real strong opinion on which way to go. The White Sox proposed us trading for the top prospect in our system, number 44 overall, Humberto Duque, international amateur free agent signing from almost 4 years ago at this point. He spent the last 2 years in rookie ball, where he did hit 10 homers and 167 at-bats this last season, but he's never hit above 194, and he has struck out in more than half of his at-bats each season. Like that he's durable, and like that if he does completely develop, he is a very useful and productive major league bat. But the question is whether he's really going to develop. And even if he does develop, he's a guy who brings nothing to the table defensively, on the base paths, bunting. He is just a pure first base / designated hitter, more likely designated hitter. And there's no guarantee that he is going to reach that potential. So I am certainly amenable to trading him. And the White Sox offered us the 23-year-old pitcher Gibran Sanborn, who's only made it as high as Double-A, but in Double-A last year he had a 2-4 record, but a 3.86 ERA, 123 ERA plus, and you can see his Sierras in High A and Double-A last year were both below 4. He started the season in Single-A ball, where he was 2-1 with a 4.30 ERA, a bit higher Sierra. but certainly looks like an interesting pitching prospect. And this is a guy who was a 14th round draft pick who has just developed exceptionally compared to expectations of not just our scout, but obviously baseball people in general, given that he was a 14th round pick. Now listed as the number 37 prospect in baseball. Like the durability, love his ability to hold runners, certainly has enough stamina to be a 5 or 6 inning kind of guy. His stuff, with a potentially great fastball, excellent changeup, and a splitter and a screwball that could both be above average when all is said and done, is intriguing. My concern is his movement is only average, and even in a best case scenario, his control is below average, and if it doesn't improve from the 40 that it's at today, it's problematic. And you can see that in his numbers last year with 14 walks in 14 and 2/3 innings in A ball, 58 walks in 77 and 2/3 innings in high A, and even the 33 walks in 51 and a third innings in double A Birmingham. So I don't love him. I definitely like the idea of bringing on some pitching, as we've talked about in previous episodes and some of you have commented on. We definitely have not been as focused as bringing on pitching through the draft and international amateur free agency, particularly the draft in recent years, as I tend to like to be. In these playthroughs, I like to build through pitching, and I haven't been as focused on that this time around. So there is a dearth of young, high-quality pitching in our minor league system. So being able to get a ready-made 23-year-old who probably could be contributing at the major league level at the end of this season is very attractive to me. But as I talked about, I think Sanborn has some flaws. The movement bothers me, and the lack of control is a real concern for me. So in terms of the comments to this, I'd say there were a couple who said, no way, don't do the deal, kind of outlining some of those concerns I had with Sanborn's control particularly. There were a few more who said, you should definitely do the deal or think about doing the deal. Sanborn is pretty close to a major league player. Duque, there is no guarantee what he's going to become. He may never be a major league player. Sanborn certainly has a higher floor. Duque has a higher ceiling, but also that in terms of the international amateur free agent classes we've seen in this playthrough, a potentially good hitting first baseman / DH who brings nothing to the table defensively is a pretty common thing for us to be seeing in IAFA, and we'll be seeing that when we dig into this year's pool shortly. So I'd say the majority of opinions were to consider trading away for Sanborn. And then there were also a couple comments that kind of got to where I got yesterday afternoon while just kind of thinking about this offline. And it was, I am definitely amenable to trading away Humberto Duque, but I need to kind of shop him for young starting pitchers and just see how Jabrant Sanborn looks relative to the broader pool of players that we could potentially get for him. So that's what I did offline yesterday, and that's what I'm going to do again now that we are working on this episode on Sunday morning, and hopefully we'll have it up for you in a couple of hours when I'm finished with it. So shopping Mr. Duque for starting pitching prospects and regulars, really not looking to bring on a real high-priced veteran, so I didn't bother looking there. Also want to kind of build someone who's, or hopefully acquire someone who is cheaper, younger, and someone who we can hopefully build around for 5 or 10 seasons. And as you can see as I scroll through this, there is a large and impressive list across baseball of potential options for Mr. Duque. So just in terms of simplicity, I spent more time offline looking at this list yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening. I'm just going to kind of highlight the guys who are 3.5 star potential or higher, who are the most realistic guys to go after. There were certainly 3-star guys that I've looked at. I have scoured this list, but not going to force you into all of the disgusting details. Should start off by noting that, of course, Sanborn is on this list. We know that we could likely trade for him. Other guys who are offered, Jaden Stigger, 23-year-old number 47 prospect in baseball, has a potential, I guess, 4 to 6 pitch arsenal at the major league level, depending on how things develop. Extreme ground baller, throws in the mid to high 90s, love his movement. My concern with him, similar to Sanborn, is the control. He's 23 years old and he's got 30 control. And last year, between A ball and high A ball, he walked 102 batters. So I like him. There's obviously potential there, but I'm hoping for a better option than him. Ben Kramer is listed as a reliever, but quite honestly, he's durable. Even if that changeup doesn't develop, he should have a 3-pitch arsenal of above average to average pitches. Control also a concern with him and his stuff, not quite as high end, particularly if he ends up being a starter. He was 9-2 with a 4.70 ERA, right at the league average in A ball last year. Another guy who's also 23 years old, number 71 prospect in baseball. Would like someone, I think, who's shown a little more, given that he's 23 years old at this point. Matthew Wenzel is a pure reliever. That changeup isn't going to be good enough. I want to get somebody who can start, so Wenzel is right out of the mix. Randy Frederick listed as a closer. He is a guy who looks like he could actually start, though. The issue with him is he's almost 25 years old. He did make his major league debut last year, split the year between A ball, Double A, and then San Diego at the major league level. Like the fact that he throws in the mid to high 90s. Pretty balanced profile. His movement and control don't look exceptional, but they're also not potentially below average, at least according to our scout. So that is a significant step in the right direction. So to me, Randy Frederick is definitely in the mix of guys to consider. We've already spent a lot of time on Gibran Sanborn. Mike Litzy could have been in the mix, but he's recovering from a partially torn UCL. Going to be out for another 4 to 5 months. 23-year-old was 0-6 with a 7.29 in A ball in 2030. He injured himself early in 2031, so he basically missed all of last year, or didn't basically miss all of last year. He missed all of last year. Like the profile here, though, will have a excellent changeup, could have an excellent fastball, and his splitter and his cutter both could be above average for the majors. Control a potential concern with him, but coming off of that pretty serious injury, I just don't think I want to take that type of risk right now, trading for a guy like him. Reagan Critch. This is a guy, if we wanted to just go for someone who's a pure young prospect, only 19 years old, was a 6th-round pick in 2030. My concern with him is if that changeup doesn't develop, he's a reliever. Also not particularly great at holding on runners. Not that I'm going to use that as the be-all and end-all, but as a tiebreaker, if everything else is even, certainly want to go with a guy who can hold runners on better. But although our scout sees him as a 3.5-star potential player, I don't think he's the answer. So quite honestly, I don't hate Sanborn in the context of this list. We talked about Randy Frederick, who I think is a pretty interesting prospect. So those two are definitely in the mix, and those of you who have eagle eyes will notice that I skipped over a 3.5-star prospect that we are well familiar with at this point, and this is Juan Estrada, a guy that we considered taking in the draft out of Community College of Baltimore County back in 2028. He's listed as the number 42 prospect in baseball. He is older than anyone else on this list. He's going to be 25 early next year. But he also has the most major league ready profile because he actually is a major league pitcher at this point. He started out last year in Double-A Indianapolis, and then he went up to Pittsburgh where he was 10-5 with a 2.91 ERA. 377 SIERA. His WAR on the year was 1.9. So he certainly wasn't a dominant pitcher, but as a rookie and as someone who we still think his changeup could get a little better and the movement on his pitches could get a little better. For some reason, we only happen to have high scouting accuracy on him right now rather than very high. He's definitely intriguing to me, and you may remember that Estrada was also the guy who was a potential two-way player when we looked at him, and he certainly looks like he could also still potentially be a pretty interesting bat. He does everything, excellent in terms of his eye and his gap power, above average contact, and average at avoiding strikeouts. The only thing he doesn't do is hit home runs, and he never will. But against right-handed pitching, this guy is potentially a devastating offensive player. So there is a part of me that says we pick Juan Estrada, and I get off my high horse of not wanting to just not wanting to go back on not using two-way players in this game, given that we've still got Ohtani for one more year. Pick Estrada, activate two-way players, and have Ohtani and Estrada both on our team as two-way players. I'm not going to do that since I don't want to change the rules in the middle of the game. But there is part of me that thinks that would be incredibly fun and incredibly entertaining to do, to have two potential two-way players on a roster who are both pretty good players. So what I don't like about Estrada, he's obviously older. He's been in the majors, so team control with him is not quite as long as any of these other prospects that we are looking at. I don't think he is a number one starter in any scenario. He's a guy with 4 above average pitches, including a changeup that could be excellent. So his stuff, and granted he's listed as a reliever right now, so I don't know if, I can't really change. There probably is a way for me to change and see what he looks like as a starter. I know it's easy to do when he's on our team. Not sure exactly how to do it with someone who's not on our team, but his stuff may only be average-ish as a starter. Hopefully it would get back to a 55, particularly if that changeup ticks up. But his movement is above average. His control is average. I see him being a good, solid 3 or 4 starter at the major league level. Ground baller with ground ball tendencies. We've built at this point a pretty solid defensive infield, with the exception of first base. So I feel like he would play well with the players we have behind him. Give us another left-handed arm potentially for the rotation. We don't need a major league ready starter at this point, given that we've got 6 already. But I'm definitely tempted by Estrada. I don't think his ceiling is quite as high as the other guys. When I think about Frederick, his sinker, his slider is better than any pitch that Estrada would have, and his fastball is better than any pitch that Estrada would have, except for his changeup. So I think top-end Frederick, his stuff is more impressive, but his movement and control don't overwhelm me. He does throw harder in the high 90s. but I think I lean towards Estrada over Frederick, just barely. And then also with Gibrandt Sanborn, again, his top end pitches with that fastball and potentially changeup are as good or better than anything that Estrada potentially has. But the movement and the control are both significantly lower. Now, in Sanborn's defense, he's a year and a half younger. He's durable. He's considered to be a higher level prospect. But I think I lean towards Estrada. And as I mentioned in the comments to the episode this morning, I wish I had thought to do this search at the end of the last episode, because I really could have used the wisdom of all of the viewers as to far as, do we go with Sanborn as a focus? Do we go with Frederick as a focus? Do we go with Estrada as a focus? Or do we go with somebody else that I may have glanced on briefly recently as a focus? But to me, those are the three top prospects. And I am leaning towards Mr. Estrada. So I think I'm going to put an offer out for him today. But I do like a suggestion that Dralix came up with, given that we're so close to the international free agent signing period. And this was more in the case of if we went for Sanborn, but to hold off on making the deal until the signing period opens and see if we can get a little bit of international pool cash thrown in as well. So I'm going to put the offer out there now. I just have a lot of questions about what Duque will become, and there's no guarantees that he's ever going to be a major leaguer. And as I said, I don't think Estrada is an ace. I'm not bringing him on to be an ace. I think he's a very solid 3 or 4. In a perfect scenario, could he be a 2-starter? I think so. I also like the optionality of a guy who we could turn into a very interesting position player if we decided to go that route. And there is part of me, if we do bring Estrada on, I don't know. You'll have to let me know what you think about this in the comments. I know some of you think I'm being unnecessarily harsh and Puritan in my approach of not switching the two-way players on after picking up Ohtani. So I guess there's an argument to just not do that at all. But there is part of me that thinks if we bring Estrada on board, I've maintained my strange moral position through the duration of having Ohtani on the team, but with Estrada being more of a young prospect, is there a reason to maybe turn two-way players on the season after next and just see what Estrada can do for us over a period of time? But we have to get him before that can even become a potential issue. But I'm going to submit an offer for Estrada now to Pittsburgh. In the meantime, I am also going to submit an offer for Mr. Frederick as well. I don't think that we necessarily want to do that deal, but I guess San Diego really wants to do it. So that's kind of a fallback. Clearly, they are very excited about that deal. So if things don't work out with Estrada and or Sanborn, and or I just decide over the coming moments that Frederick is the right way to go, we would certainly wait till the free agent signing period begins and ask them to maybe throw in a little bit of extra international amateur free agent budget for us to make that deal happen. Because Alex Anthopoulos seems very eager to send us Randy Frederick right now, which is always a red flag, isn't it? And the Pirates have come back and said almost, but it's an almost where just throw in a garbage player and get it done. So if we respond to the message, we can complete it as is right now. So essentially right now we've got the option to pick up Estrada or Frederick, or if I could pull up the right trade proposal here, right there, Mr. Sanborn. So Duque is likely to be moving away in the next few days for a young pitcher, but I'm going to see if I can extract a little more out of these teams and maybe get a little more international free agent signing money when the period begins. As we talked about in our last episode, and I think as some of you pointed out in the comments, we do have a little bit of extra money to spend this time period compared to others. And I was attributing that to our 83 win season, but there is something in terms of budgets and profitability and payrolls that goes into that formula as well, which is probably more the reason that we've got 5.23 million. But we do have more than the minimum, so that helps us. But certainly if we're going to get real creative in this international amateur free agent signing period, having a little bit of extra money to play with would help. So I'm going to wait a couple more days till that signing period begins, and then respond to those trades, ask for a little extra money, and also figure out a strategy for the international amateur free agents. All right, so we've made it to the international free agent amateur signing period. So let's respond to these trade proposals with the White Sox and Mr. Sanborn. We are going to ask for $500,000. Ooh, our assistant GM says we're settling for too little. I don't know that that's accurate. I don't know about the judgment of these assistant general managers. I don't know that they're even going to go for that, but let's ask for $500,000 in international pool room from them and submit the offer. We will take a look at these other offers, and San Diego, who is very excited to ship us the potential closer who might be able to start, Randy Frederick. Ooh, do they not have any signing pool? Or am I approaching this the wrong way? Randy Frederick, trade for player. We want to give you the top prospect in our organization, Humberto Duque. Why? There we go. It won't let us add international free agent signing pool. So maybe San Diego just doesn't have any money, or maybe they've already offered it all out to somebody. And then last but not least, Pittsburgh and Juan Estrada. Let's see if we can get them to throw in $250,000 of international pool money in addition to Estrada, and whether they come back and they just want a scrub player to make that work, or maybe they're open to just doing it straight up, or maybe they want a stud if we add in that amount of additional money. So hopefully we will hear from those teams on the potential opportunity to add a little bit of extra international amateur free agent money very shortly. But since it is opening day for the signing period, it's time for us to start putting a strategy in place. And I'm not going to go in a deep dive on all of the individual players. Kind of looked at many of them last episode, so not going to revisit all of them and bore you with the details. But there are a couple that I wanted to hit. One would be Girolamo Cecchedino, the Italian prospect that 3/4 Badger is interested in learning more about. Good personality from Cecchedino, looks like a corner outfielder, durable in terms of his injury proneness. If the bat fully develops, it's certainly a useful major league bat with 65 contact, 55 home run power. Probably more than useful, to be fair, if it fully develops. But certainly no guarantees that he will fully develop. Is only barely 17 years old, so a relatively young prospect, like the high work ethic, like the durability. Not a horrible prospect for $750,000 that he's looking for, given that league interest in him is high. I think I'm more inclined to go with someone like Christos Cavazos, who's only looking for $100,000 more, also has a really good personality, little better defensively, and if his bat develops to its full potential, is a more well-rounded bat. And in addition to checking in on that Italian prospect that Three Quarters Badger noted, wanted to check in on a couple of more bargain basement prospects that were noted by Dralix, who has had some really interesting comments over the past several years of this Buffalo playthrough regarding his approach to international amateur free agency and kind of more of a bargain basement approach, which I don't necessarily always follow, but has definitely given me a lot to think about. And he wanted to see Juan Aranda, who's looking for 200,000, and Rogelio Cuellar, who's looking for 190,000. Juan Aranda, not even 17 years old, so he's a relatively young prospect. Just don't see him being a big-time prospect. It's really a numbers game. You could bring in somebody like him for cheap, but the fact that his stuff at the high end is viewed as only a 40, not great at holding runners, very marginal stamina for a starter, and questionable whether he'd have a starter's repertoire. Even though he's a bargain, I probably wouldn't make an offer there. Rogelio Cuellar out of the Dominican, he's a no-go for me. Just a horrible personality, low leadership, work ethic, and intelligence, which are the top three traits in my opinion. And honestly, if I had to pick what the fourth trait was, although I care less about adaptability and greed, and my mind is blanking on what the final personality trait is. But adaptability, I could argue, would be the one that I care about fourth most, behind work ethic, leadership, and intelligence in some view. So awful personality, and that movement just scares me. Does potentially have a 5-pitch arsenal, but even though he's a bargain, I just think with the low work ethic and what our scout thinks of him at this point, that's throwing good money after bad in my view. But certainly if you want to make a more diversified portfolio and bring on 6, 7, 8, 9 prospects, I get the theory behind that, because some of these guys who you're spending $100,000, $200,000 on are occasionally going to develop and be the best player in a class and better than the guys that you were spending $4.5, $5 million on. So definitely am more inclined, after kind of thinking about what Dralix has shared in recent months, in spraying the money around a bit, but don't necessarily think that that is my strategy this time. As I've said in the comments and kind of touched upon in the last episode, if we go with a pitcher, it's going to be Juan Ramos. Not that I necessarily think he's that much better than Julio Buccio, but he is a lot more reasonable in terms of his pricing, and we've got a very strong relationship with him. So I think Ramos would be the pitcher if we go after a pitcher. But there are some very intriguing batters available this year. And as far as our strategy for this year, as I mentioned, Juan Ramos is the pitcher I'm going to go after if I go after a pitcher, and we need pitchers in our farm system. So I'm hoping he will be available as a fallback option, which is always a risky way to proceed, but we've talked about this a lot in previous episodes. In Joep Spreckley, with the potential to have off the charts contact, home run power, and excellent eye, is basically the holy grail prospect in terms of the three hitting categories that I care about the most. View him as a 5-star prospect. He is a pure DH. No prospect for him being even a useful defensive player in the outfield. Guess you could play him at first base or left field if you needed to, but he is just a pure bat. I don't think we are going to be able to bring him on board. He's looking for $2.8 million. We only have a strong relationship with him. There's very high league interest in him. But I have to try to bring on a guy with that batting profile. He's looking for $2.8 million. I'm going to just try to go early and hard with him. Offer him $3 million. See if maybe we can land him early in the process before there's too much competition. I don't think that's going to be the case. You can see we've made minor league offers to a few other players here as we try to round out our minor league system. I think Spreckley's probably going to go for the maximum or close to the maximum, $4.5+ million, in which case my plan is to drop out on him and hopefully pivot back to Ramos if he's around, or maybe Buccio if he isn't. But I feel like I just want to make an offer on a bat like that. But that does leave us enough money to make a play at Christos Kavatsos. We talked about him earlier. Only high league interest. He's a guy that we didn't scout in the first period, but we've had him, I believe, in the last 3 camps at this point. Love his personality. Think with that high work ethic, his chance of fully developing is higher than for some people. He is a bit older as a prospect, not brilliant defensively. Looking for $850,000. We will start off with $700,000 to him. I know Dralix is probably telling me that I could go for less than that right now, which I get, and I'm sure you're right about. But I like to try to get players locked up sooner rather than later, so I tend to give them a little bit more than perhaps they were. Perhaps I need to try to get them locked up. Julio Anaya is another guy who I think Dralix actually brought up and got me looking at, like his work ethic, like his durability, potentially, excellent 4th outfielder and possibly certainly a starting corner outfielder if he fully develops. The question is whether he fully develops. But he is not looking for a ton of money. League interest in him is low. So I am going to throw out a very tiny contract offer to him. See if 120 he would think about. He wants more than that. How about 140? And he's willing to think about 140,000. So we'll put out offers to those 3 guys to start as we try to build an international amateur free agent class. So Anayos and Kavatsos, relatively low offers. A high offer to Spreckley. If Spreckley falls through or comes back and says I need $4.5 million, I guess there's a chance we do that, particularly if we've already got Kavatsos locked up or Anaya locked up, and particularly if by that time we may have a little extra international amateur free agent money available through the potential trades that we're thinking about. But if we have to pivot off of Spreckley, 3/4 Badger is a fan of Jorge Berrios, the catching prospect. I don't love the personality, but at least it's not low work ethic. I don't love that he's only average defensively as a catcher, but he is a potentially very special bat as a catcher. So I get that there's some value here. He, like Spreckley, is looking for big money, but I would consider pivoting to Berrios if Spreckley falls through, and as we talked about, Ramos or perhaps Buccio, if either of them is still available, if Spreckley falls through, are other guys that I may pivot towards. It looks like initial results or initial views, even though I don't have emails on this, is that Anaya and Spreckley favor those offers. Still waiting to hear from Cavazos, and we'll wait to hear back on the trade offers that we've made as well. And we have some very sad news. Dansby Swanson has left. The fans are disappointed. I don't know why the fans are so disappointed, given that he did not perform well for us. He got $6 million from the Cubs, just a one-year deal. He hit only .244 for us with 6 homers and 127 at-bats, an injury-plagued season. This is something that's been going on. He is now once again listed as a captain, but I don't know if this is a bug that some of you are seeing or it just depends on the player's role on the team, but he was a captain when we brought him on board. That definitely went away from his personality, and now it looks like it's back. Still have fan interest at over 100. So no harm, no foul moving on from Mr. Swanson. Supposedly all 3 of our offers are favored. Unfortunately, we have not heard back yet on the trades that we proposed that we're looking for some international amateur free agent money. So I think that our potential trade partners are slow playing us in their responses to see how their international amateur signings go as well. And not surprisingly, Jupp Spreckley has come back to us and says that he wants more money. Recall, we offered him $3 million. He's got a max offer from a team that he likes more than ours. So that's actually, not great news that we're not going to be able to get him, but it is good news that it only took us 3 days to figure that out, because that gives us the opportunity to pivot away from Mr. Spreckley. Anaya and Cavazos both favor our offers right now, so that is still positive. I'm going to visit Mr. Juan Ramos right now. Would not be the worst thing to bring in some pitching help. We've got a very strong relationship with him. He's looking for less money than either of the other pitchers that we're most interested in. Says he's only looking for $1.04 million. We're going to try to just get this done early. $1.25 million. Outbid the A's and see what Wildfire Ramos thinks of what we're offering. And both Julio Anaya and Christos Cavazos have come back and said that they are looking for more money as well. And we still have not heard any response to our trade offers. I don't want to completely forget about what's going on there either. So Anaya, the Braves have made him a juicy offer. He says he wants $200,000. That was his original demand. Looks like he really wants more from us than that to make that work. So maybe we won't be pursuing things with Mr. Anaya. Cavazos, guy that I like more than Anaya. Ooh, his money's getting up there. He was only $800,000 to begin with. But I want to try to bring Cavazos on board. I'm willing to give him $1.3 million. I like the personality. I like the diversity of his bat. And particularly with us kind of pivoting to a pitcher who hopefully is not going to be a $4 million guy when all is said and done, I think we've got the opportunity to put in a little more money on Cavazos. And Cavazos says he likes the offer. And at this point, we have not heard back on any of those offers that we put out for Duque that required. There's an interesting prospect who we hadn't seen before, Baden Lumby, the number 77 prospect in baseball for Humberto Duque. But quite honestly, I would love to get a little bit of international amateur free agent money, but it seems like here in the very early stages of international amateur free agency, not surprisingly, teams are holding on to that and not responding to our trade offers. It could be a situation where 2 or 3 weeks from now, when there's not a lot left on the market, or they have a random $400,000 that they didn't spend, they'd be more amenable to giving us some of that money. But I think I want Juan Estrada on our team. He helps our pitching staff now. He helps our pitching staff for years to come. I don't think he is a superstar, as I said. I don't think he's ever a one. He's a 3 or a 4 who could become a 2. But I don't know what Duque is going to become. And Duque, as a hitting prospect who can't field and can't run, is kind of the most generic international amateur free agent prospect possible. Like his durability and still like the potential, but I really like a good young pitcher under team control for the next half decade. So even though we may be costing ourselves a little bit of international amateur free agent money by doing this now, I am not going to, well, I just can't help myself sometimes. I was going to see if the Pirates could throw in some money, but they're way over budget as is, so that's why I can't get them to add in any cash. I am not going to hold this up for some garbage prospect. Or I have always been intrigued by Edgar Zamora, but I don't think they are going to throw him in. But he would be a really nice backup catcher for us. He's making good money now. He's arbitration eligible. I might as well ask for this. I don't think they're going to do it. If they don't, I know they're not going to do this. It's just a matter of how much we would have to throw in to get Edgar Zamora. Yeah, NFW from them on that, which makes sense. That would have been a huge trade for us to get Zamora, who would be an incredible backup catcher while we have Rutschman on board, and then potentially could take over for Rutschman down the line. But I want to get Juan Estrada on the team. I know it's unlikely that they're going to trade him away to someone else over the next week or two, while I'm kind of waiting for the international amateur free agent money to potentially develop. And I know it's also relatively unlikely that over the next week or two they would change their willingness to do it straight up for Humberto Duque. But I just think that there's so much uncertainty about what Duque is going to become. Estrada, we know what he is. He could also become a very interesting offensive player for us down the line. He's a guy that we've been following literally since he was first draft available several years ago. So we've been following him in his progress over the course of his career. He's done a good job in the major leagues. Gives us even more optionality in our rotation for this year with a 7th guy who could be a solid major league starter, and is certainly somebody that we would plan around building for the next several years. So we are going to go ahead and complete that trade. We have traded away the top prospect in our system, Humberto Duque, but we welcome aboard Juan Estrada, another big-time pitcher potentially for us, that makes me feel even better about potentially moving Ohtani into an everyday role for us next year. Or not next year, next season at this point. So let me know what you think of the Estrada trade, what you think of the different options that we had in front of us there. Definitely agree that there is potential we could have gotten some international amateur free agent money with him if we had waited another couple of weeks, but there's no guarantee that he'd still be on the market for us in a couple of weeks. And there's also no guarantee that in a couple of weeks there's going to be an international amateur free agent available that we really care about spending the money on. I like the idea of trying to bring in some of that money early, these first 5 or 6 days of the international amateur free agent signing period, but it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. And I did not want to take the risk of not being able to trade Duque for Estrada. I think I really like the trade. Obviously, if you've got other opinions, always like to hear them, but I think it made a ton of sense for us for not just the near term, but the medium to long term, hopefully, as well. And that lets us turn all of our attention for the near term and the remainder of this episode to international amateur free agency, where we are pretty much out on Spreckley. Cavazos favors our offer, waiting to hear from Ramos, and Anaya's looking for more money right now. Not totally inclined to give it to him at this point. And perhaps not surprisingly, Cavazos' number is going up. Ramos' number is going up as well. So let's see what we're dealing with those two. I like Christos Cavazos. I'm not going to go crazy on him. Ooh, says he's looking for $2.2 million now. So he is getting up there. And Juan Ramos, the starting pitcher, $1.34 million. So that is much more reasonable. I'm going to offer 1.35. This number seems to keep going up. All right, 1.4 million for Wildfire Ramos. And I think I am going to consider, we got 3.8 million left at this point because the only active offer out there at this point is to Ramos. As much as I like Cavazos, I'm going to at least check in on the big catcher Jorge Berrios right now and see if he is potentially attainable. And his number is not that big. I'm going to put an offer out to Jorge Berrios right now. Although that number keeps going up. All right, 1.5 million offer out to the catcher Jorge Berrios. Talked about, I don't love some of his personality traits. Don't love that he's only average defensively, but his three-quarters Badger pointed out in the comments to the last episode, a catcher with that batting profile is a pretty unique asset. And if the numbers for him and the market for him isn't developing as robustly as he may have initially hoped, I think it's worth at least getting an offer out to him. Now, the problem with, or the potential problem with my approach here, where, we've got offers out to a bunch of people, only 2 of them are live right now, is that we end up with nobody because we're not making a big enough commitment. We're not going in hard enough for anybody. And the prices on these guys like Berrios and Ramos end up going up real high. And then we miss out on Cavazos and Anaya, who we could have gotten for more reasonable numbers. So we're potentially playing a dangerous game, but we're also playing the type of game that if it works out perfectly, you end up with a IAFA class that you really like. And Juan Ramos has now come back looking for more money, so the negative scenario could happen. Berrios, the catcher, supposedly favors our offer. Let's see exactly what Ramos is looking for. And Buccio is still out there, so if Ramos gets crazy with his money, we could pivot to Buccio. $2.2 million for Ramos. Buccio's number was 2.4 that he had been sharing with people before things opened up. And he says he's looking for 4.2 now. So I still think Ramos is the right one to potentially pursue there. We'll meet his demand. Oh, and now he's doing this. Oh, I really like your organization, but give me some more money. 2.4 million, but I think he's starting to play us. So that could be it for as far as high we're going to go for the pitcher Ramos. Clearly, if we were able to get Ramos and Berrios for less than 4 million, that would still be a win. It would borderline give us an opportunity to even potentially pivot back to Cavazos if he's available, and certainly pivot back to Anaya. But we've got to get a guy or two signed before the end of this month, just to guarantee ourselves we're going to get something out of the higher end of the IAFA market this year. And things are happening. We did get Berrios signed, the catcher. So 3/4 Badger, thanks for influencing me on that one. I think the money that we spent on him, 1.5 million, was a lot less than he was supposedly looking for. As I said, I don't like some of the personality traits. I don't love that he's only average defensively, but if that bat fully develops with excellent home run power and off-the-charts eye, he is a very interesting catcher to have. So good that Berrios is on board. Unfortunately, Cavazos is gone. He signed with Nashville for $2.32 million, so in that neighborhood that he was looking for the last time we checked in with him. Joep Spreckley signed, not surprisingly, for the full $5.7 million with Baltimore, so we never could have matched that unless we had gotten some additional international amateur free agent money. But we've got the catcher signed in Berrios. Now it's a matter of seeing what Ramos says. Ramos likes our offer right now. So players are starting to come off of the board here with the international amateur free agent period. Still have the 3 pitchers we liked, all still available. The batter situation is getting a little slimmer. Anaya, we've still got 1.33 million left to spend. I may revisit things with Anaya here. Oof, he says he's looking for 400,000 now. That kind of money for his profile. I like the durability, and again, 75 contacts, 60 home run power with a high work ethic. I would like to get more than 2 guys out of this class. What I don't want to do is put an offer out there to Anaya and then be $100,000 away from being able to land Ramos. But you only live once. We're going to get an offer out there to Anaya as well to keep the conversation going. Will he do 400,000 rather than 410? He'll at least think about it. So we'll see what happens with Anaya and keep the conversation going with Mr. Ramos as well. And the exact scenario I feared is coming to fruition. Anaya likes our offer. Ramos looking for more money. I'm hoping we still have enough available to at least make one more play at Mr. Ramos. Doesn't sound like it. He's got an offer greater than our remaining bonus pool. So the pitchers may be falling apart for us in this IAFA period. We've still got a lot of money to spend at this point, but I know that 3.3 was not actually the other pitchers off the market now. We could pivot to Juan Aller. My concern with him is he's only a reliever, but he is a potentially excellent reliever if he develops. What's he looking for at this point? 1.8 million. Doesn't seem like there's a huge market for him, so I'm going to at least see if 1.5 might work, and he's willing to think about that. Certainly not ideal to be pivoting to a relief pitcher, but we need relievers as well, and they all can't be failed starters. And again, the fact that we have already come out of this with the big catching prospect Jorge Berrios for a lot less money than I thought he would go for, means that I don't think I can look at this international amateur free agent period as a failure. but clearly we'll feel better about things if Allaire and Anaya are able to both be signed by us. Wonder what Tinajero is looking for at this point. Not a prospect that I loved as much because he was one of those generic first base slash DH types that seem to be very prevalent that we've been talking about. But it seems like we could potentially make a play for him as well. I don't want to lock up all the money, though. I want to be able to negotiate. I don't love Tinajero so much that I want to put him on, that I want to make an offer to him right this second. Let's wait and see what happens with these offers to Anaya and Allaire that they both allegedly favor before we move in a different direction. And Anaya has come back, says he is looking for more money. He wants $700,000 now. So he has gotten quite greedy for someone who supposedly was not looking for much money when all of this began. We've got the $1.5 million out to Allaire. I don't know that we have enough to still be in play for Tinajero. 2.23 million. Yeah, we cannot. We can't make that offer right now. So I guess if things fell apart with Allaire, we could potentially pivot to Tinajero if he was still around, but it's getting tricky. It's kind of interesting. Edgar Carlo, a guy that we really didn't like and we stopped scouting largely because of the poor personality, is still available. I wonder what he is looking for. Well, he's got a big time offer out for him, so good for Edgar. And Juan Allaire is looking for more money now. Juan Ramos ended up signing with the Cubs, I'm guessing for pretty big money. Yeah, $4.75 million. So for a guy who was thought to be looking for 1.6, he did really well, but that was not a number that we'd like to hit. Allaire, what is he looking for at this point? 2.6 million for a potentially really good reliever. Tinajero is still out there, and he's got a bigger offer than we can hit. So I think at this point we are kind of pot committed to the reliever Allaire. We'll offer him 2.6 million. And Julio Anaya, the center fielder, who was originally looking for just $200,000, is now signed with the Dodgers for $620,000. So a number that we could have certainly beat. Really hoping things work out with Juan Allaire. And I know I'm pronouncing his name differently each time. I'm just kind of making this up as I go, given that he's a fictional person. But I like Allaire. I think I'm going to stick with that. Wow, and Juan Allaire looking for even more money now. $3.4 million from the Rockies. All right. Oh. I don't think he really wants to sign with us, and 3.5 million is a ton, but I have offline recently spent some time digging through some of these lower regarded prospects that are still available as far as both pitchers and hitters, and there's just no one, when you look at the combination of what they're looking for and personalities, that I'm particularly excited about. Alere, we're definitely spending a ton for him. The fact that we got a bargain on the catcher works in our favor, but clearly we're getting close to being tapped out on what we can do with him. So I think we'll find out what happens with Alere, and then that will probably be it for this episode. We'll either get Alere signed and have no money left, or I'll have a lot of money left to potentially spray on a bunch of middling prospects. And we did thankfully end up getting Juan Alere signed. I mean, quite honestly, the money we spent on him is obviously our biggest signing, $3.5 million. Now that's still less than the big pitchers and the big hitters that we were looking at early in the episode went for, but certainly not the way I would have drawn this up. But still taking a look at our international complex now. Berrios and Alere, the two guys that we signed this year, at least potential-wise, are two of the top prospects in our system. Berrios, the catcher, at $1.5 million, I think is very good value, despite some of the concerns I do have about him. And Juan Alere, if he fully develops, he looks like he is an excellent left-handed reliever. A lot of money to invest in a left-handed reliever, but he's durable, decent at holding runners, pretty good stamina for a reliever. Not something I would usually do, but we need arms in our organization, and Alere, even though it's only as a reliever, is certainly a higher potential arm than most of the young pitchers in our organization at this point. So we still have a little bit of money to potentially play around with over the next few weeks as we start getting this team ready for spring training. $230,000 left, so I'm going to see if there's some bargains that I can spend it on, but won't bore you with all of the details of me trying to figure those players out. But we'll obviously let you know if we're able to get anything interesting for that last $230,000. If not, it'll give us a little bit of extra money to spend during this season. We did end up, before the start of the preseason, bumping our scouting and development budgets both up a bit. So feel real good about where those are in the context of the team that we think we're going to have on the field. So we've added a catcher and a relief pitcher in international amateur free agency. And importantly, we've added a young left-handed pitcher who we think could be a potentially very important starter for us for many years to come by trading away the top prospect in our system. And with Duque gone, our system is now down to being ranked 23rd overall. We still have 4 top 100 prospects, but no top 50 prospects with Duque gone. But I like the fact that we have Estrada in our system now. Feel like we've accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish this off season. And as I said, we've still got $5.5 million left. Was it a perfect off season? No. When I say we accomplished everything we wanted to, it's fair to caveat that by saying we accomplished everything we wanted to within the context of the limited budget we had available. But feel like it's been a productive off season, and we've now got about 3 weeks till spring training starts and a little less than 2 months till the start of the 2032 season, and we will find out what happens during that time frame in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great day, and sincerely appreciate all of the comments that helped us get to the decisions we made over the course of this episode. Until the next time, thanks.